It is strange how family can feel like both comfort and danger, all in the same breath. For most of my life, my brother and I were inseparable. Michael was 2 years older, sharp-minded, protective, and endlessly convincing. When our father passed away, I believed his calmness would keep us together. I thought he would protect what little family we had left. I was wrong. The morning of the funeral was gray, the kind of sky that looks like it is holding back tears. Our small family home was crowded with distant relatives whispering condolences that sounded rehearsed. I stood by the window, staring out at the oak tree our father had planted decades ago. That tree had been our childhood, climbing, falling, and learning to get back up again. Michael came up behind me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "He would have wanted us to stay strong," he said softly. His voice trembled, but I didn't notice it then. I simply nodded. He looked sincere, exhausted even. I wanted to believe him. A week later, the lawyer called us both to his office to discuss our father's estate. It was a modest inheritance: the house, a few savings, and some company shares from the small manufacturing business our father had built from scratch. The meeting was quiet at first, the air heavy with formality and grief. Then the lawyer began reading the will. "To my children, Michael and Sarah," he said, "I leave my home and remaining assets to be shared equally between them, as they have shared their lives together." My eyes filled with tears. It was exactly what I expected from my father: fair, balanced, loving. But when I turned to look at Michael, he was already staring down at his lap, his expression unreadable. The lawyer continued. "However," he said, clearing his throat, "there is an updated version of this document dated 2 months before Mr. Evans's passing." I frowned. "Updated?" "Yes," the lawyer replied, sliding a paper across the desk. "In this version, the full estate has been transferred solely to your brother." The words struck me like cold water. I looked at Michael, waiting for an explanation. He didn't meet my eyes. "It was Dad's decision," he said quietly. "He told me he wanted to make things simple." "Simple?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "Simple for who?" he sighed. "Sarah, you've been busy with your job, your life. I handled everything these past few years. The bills, the business, his care. Dad knew that." There was something about the ease in his tone that unsettled me. The way he said it. Practiced, almost rehearsed. The lawyer continued explaining the paperwork, but my thoughts drowned in disbelief. My father had always believed in fairness. He would never have left me out. Something wasn't right. After the meeting, I confronted Michael outside. "Did Dad really say that?" He looked at me, finally, and smiled faintly. "You think I forged a will?" I hesitated. "I think I know Dad, and this doesn't sound like him." He shrugged. "People change their minds." Then he walked away, leaving me standing in the cold parking lot, clutching a copy of a document that felt like a betrayal inked in black and white. That night, I went through my father's study. The air still carried his scent: old books, cedarwood, and coffee. His handwriting covered the margins of business notes and journals. I searched every drawer, every folder, every envelope, hoping to find something. A letter, a note, anything that explained what had happened. But all I found was silence. Over the next few days, Michael moved quickly. Too quickly. He contacted the bank, transferred ownership of the company shares, and filed for the deed of the house. His tone turned colder with each conversation. "It's legal, Sarah," he said during one call. "Dad made his choice. You need to accept it. Accept it." As if losing my father hadn't been enough. Now I was losing my brother, too. Our relatives stayed quiet, whispering sympathy, but avoiding involvement. Family, I learned, can vanish when truth becomes inconvenient. A month later, I received a letter from the bank addressed to my father, a routine financial statement that had somehow slipped through. I almost threw it away, but something stopped me. Inside was a reference to a joint account, one I had never heard of. The account was opened 6 months before my father's death, listing only his and my brother's names. My pulse quickened. I called the bank and asked for details. The representative hesitated, citing privacy. But when I mentioned the date of my father's passing and provided documentation, her voice softened. There were large withdrawals, she said carefully. Tens of thousands, all signed by Mr. Michael Evans. For a moment, the room spun. My knees went weak. My brother hadn't just taken what was left. He had been taking it while our father was still alive. I hung up and stared at the envelope in my hand. The lie was deeper than I thought. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was about trust, love, and loyalty twisted into something unrecognizable. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the same oak tree swaying outside. Its branches looked like arms reaching for something they could never quite grasp. I thought about the promises we had made as children, that no matter what, we would always protect each other. But somewhere along the way, Michael had stopped seeing me as his sister and started seeing me as competition. And while he might have won the paper battle, I felt the quiet fire of something stronger beginning to burn inside me. This wasn't over. The weeks that followed felt like walking through fog. Every corner of the house echoed with memories I could not bear to face. The clock ticked the same, the light filtered through the same curtains, but everything felt hollow. My father's laughter had once filled these rooms. Now, only silence lived here, and my brother's absence. Michael moved out soon after claiming ownership of the house. "You can stay until you find somewhere," he had said, his tone detached, almost polite. He had the same calm expression he always wore when lying. I remember standing at the doorway as he packed the last of his things. The air between us was sharp with unspoken things. I wanted to ask him why one more time, but the words refused to come. He didn't look back when he closed the door. After that, I rarely heard from him. A few texts, short, practical, cold. I told myself I would let it go, that I would focus on rebuilding my own life. But betrayal has a way of sitting beneath your skin, whispering when the world goes quiet. I began to notice things, subtle, deliberate changes. My name was being removed from documents related to Dad's company. Friends of my father who once called me daughter stopped reaching out. When I visited the office one afternoon, the receptionist looked uneasy. "I'm sorry, Ms. Evans," she said softly. "Mr. Evans instructed us to direct all inquiries through him. Mr. Evans, my brother." The title sounded foreign now, detached from the boy who used to chase me through the backyard with a garden hose. I walked away that day, feeling a deep ache I could not name. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was the realization that Michael had rewritten our father's legacy, one quiet lie at a time. That night, I visited my father's grave. The earth was still fresh, the grass barely growing over it. I knelt down, brushing my fingers across the cool stone. "You would never have done this," I whispered. Not to me. I stayed there until the stars came out. It was the only place that still felt honest. Back home, I opened my laptop and began looking through the company's public records. I had no idea what I was searching for, just a need to see. And there it was. A filing from 2 months before my father's death, showing a sudden transfer of business shares to Michael's name. The signature was my father's, but something about it looked off. I pulled out an old birthday card he had signed the same week. The handwriting wasn't just different, it was strained, almost forced. A chill crept through me. Over the following days, I started piecing things together quietly. The joint account withdrawals, the sudden updated will, the business transfers. Every discovery added another crack in the image of the brother I thought I knew. I reached out to our aunt, who had been close to my father. "Did Dad ever mention changing his will?" I asked. She hesitated. "No, dear. He always said you two would share everything equally." "Why?" I swallowed hard. "Because apparently he didn't." Her silence said everything. Then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I got a call from a man named George, my father's former accountant. He had found my number on an old business card. "Your father was a good man," he said. But something about his finances in the last year troubled me. My heart raced. "What do you mean?" There were withdrawals that didn't make sense. He once told me he thought someone close to him was taking advantage of his declining health. Then he stopped returning my calls. The room seemed to blur around me. Did he say who? No, George replied. But he looked heartbroken. I thanked him, my voice shaking, and hung up. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely hold the phone. That night, I sat by the window again, watching the oak tree sway in the wind. My father's voice echoed in my memory, something he had said when I was young. Trust is like glass, Sarah. Once it's cracked, even if you fix it, it never looks the same. The distance between Michael and me had become more than physical. It was moral, spiritual, almost irreversible. Yet, in that distance, something else began to grow. Resolve. The next day, I called the lawyer. I'd like to request copies of all versions of my father's will, I said firmly. He hesitated but agreed. When I received them a week later, I spread the documents out across my dining table. The original will was dated 5 years ago, neat, clear, and written in my father's familiar hand. The updated one looked different. The ink tone varied slightly, the signature oddly slanted. I could not prove it yet, but my instincts screamed that it had been forged. I stared at those papers for hours. Every detail felt like a wound reopening, but I refused to look away. I made copies, organized notes, and kept everything hidden in a folder marked Dad's Legacy. From that day on, I began living 2 lives. On the surface, I appeared calm, working, socializing, pretending to move on. But underneath, I was quietly gathering evidence. Every receipt, every email, every small inconsistency was a thread leading me closer to the truth. Still, it came at a cost. My nights were restless, filled with dreams of my father calling my name and Michael turning away. My mornings began with exhaustion and ended in silence. The isolation was heavy, but the fire within me kept burning. Then, one evening, I saw him. Michael. He was standing outside the house, my father's house, talking to a realtor. I watched from across the street, my hands shaking. They were discussing selling it. That was the moment I realized how far he was willing to go. He wasn't just erasing me from the past. He was trying to erase me from every piece of our shared life. I went back inside, locked the door, and whispered to myself, "You've taken enough, Michael. But this time, you won't win." The distance between us was now complete. But what he did not know was that in that distance, I had begun building something he never expected, a way back to the truth. By the time I saw Michael again, the anger had softened into something sharper, clarity. I had spent weeks preparing, quietly collecting everything I needed, documents, emails, witness notes, and my father's old recordings. Every night I rehearsed what I would say, but nothing could have prepared me for the moment itself. He agreed to meet at a cafe near the city center. I had phrased my message carefully. We need to talk about Dad. Nothing more, nothing less. When I arrived, he was already there, leaning back in his chair, expensive watch glinting under the dim light, a half smile on his lips. He looked like a man who had already won. "Sarah," he said smoothly, rising just enough to appear polite. "You look well." I sat across from him, my hands folded, calm. "You too," I replied, though my voice betrayed the weight in my chest. He took a slow sip of his coffee. "So what's this about? I assume you're not here to reminisce." "No," I said quietly. "I'm here for the truth." For a moment his eyes flickered, barely noticeable but enough to tell me he knew where this was going. "I found the will," I continued, sliding a folder across the table. "Both versions. He didn't touch it." His jaw tightened slightly. And one of them isn't real." He leaned back, forcing a small laugh. "Sarah, you always had such a vivid imagination." I held his gaze. "The accountant called me. George. He said Dad suspected someone was taking advantage of him before he died." That wiped the smile off his face. His hands stiffened, fingers tapping against the coffee cup. "George talks too much," he muttered under his breath. I felt the air between us shift. The mask was slipping. "Michael," I said softly, "Dad trusted you. He loved you more than anyone. If you'd asked him for help, he would have given you everything willingly." "Why did you have to lie?" His expression darkened. "You don't understand how it feels," he snapped. "You were always the golden one, the responsible daughter, the one he bragged about. I was just—" The disappointment, the words hung heavy in the air. I hadn't expected him to say it so plainly. "I didn't take it because I wanted to hurt you," he said, voice low. "I did it because I was tired of being second." My throat tightened. "So you forged our father's signature and stole everything he built?" He slammed his hand on the table, drawing a few glances from nearby customers. "You think you were the only one who sacrificed? I worked for years trying to prove myself. And when he got sick, you came back. Suddenly the perfect daughter again. Suddenly the one who cared." The bitterness in his voice was raw, almost childlike. For a moment I saw not a thief, but the broken brother underneath the greed. But pity could not change what he had done. I opened my bag and placed a small flash drive on the table. "Do you know what this is?" I asked quietly. He stared at it. "Another accusation?" "It's Dad's voice," I said. "The night before he died, he recorded a message on his phone. I found it in his cloud storage." Michael went still. The color drained from his face. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the small space, weak, trembling, but unmistakably his. "If you're hearing this, something has gone wrong. Michael's been handling my finances lately, but I'm worried. I saw the documents he brought me to sign. They didn't look right. Sarah, if you find this, promise me you'll check everything." The sound of that voice broke me all over again. But it broke Michael too. He stared at the table, breathing unevenly. When the recording ended, silence fell between us like a verdict. Finally, he whispered, "You shouldn't have found that." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You shouldn't have hidden it." He looked up, his eyes burning, not with guilt, but fear. "What are you going to do with it?" "I haven't decided yet," I said honestly. "But I do know this. Dad deserves justice, and I won't stop until he gets it." He reached across the table, desperation flickering in his movements. "Sarah, please. You'll destroy what's left of our family." I pulled my hand back. "You already did that, Michael." For a long time, we just sat there. The rain began to fall outside, tapping against the glass, soft but relentless. I thought of our childhood, of muddy shoes and shared secrets, of the brother who once promised to protect me from everything. And I realized something. He wasn't the same person anymore. Greed had devoured him from the inside out. "I don't hate you," I said finally, "but I can't protect you from what's coming." He looked at me like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, realizing too late that the ground beneath him was gone. As I stood to leave, he said quietly, "You'll regret this." I turned back, my voice calm, almost kind. "No, Michael. You will." Outside, the rain had grown heavier. I walked slowly, each drop cooling the fire that had burned inside me for months. The confrontation hadn't healed anything, but it had revealed everything. Now, I had proof. Now I had his confession, and for the first time since Dad died, I wasn't afraid anymore. The truth was no longer a distant hope. It was real. And it was mine to wield. After that confrontation, the silence between us became louder than any words ever could. Michael stopped calling. He stopped pretending. But I knew that beneath that silence, something was shifting. Panic. The next week, I met with my father's lawyer, Mr. Graham, a patient man with silver hair and a voice that carried quiet authority. He had known my father for over 20 years. When I placed the flash drive on his desk, his expression changed from curiosity to concern. "Are you sure you want to open this door, Sarah?" he asked gently. "It's already open," I replied. "I just need to walk through it." He listened to the recording, and when it ended, he exhaled slowly. "This changes everything," he said. "If your father's signature was forged, the revised will is invalid." That means the original stands, and you're entitled to half of everything. Half. The word didn't even feel like justice. It felt like balance restored. Mr. Graham promised to start the process quietly. "We'll request handwriting verification," he said. "But Sarah?" "This could get ugly," I nodded. "It already has." In the days that followed, subtle cracks began to appear in Michael's carefully constructed world. His tone shifted from dismissive to nervous whenever anyone mentioned my name. A few of Dad's old associates reached out asking questions. The accountant, George, agreed to provide a statement. It was happening. Slowly, quietly, but it was happening. Then one evening, I received an email from an unknown address. No subject line. Just an attachment and a single sentence. "You need to see this before it disappears." My heart raced as I opened the file. It was a scanned document, an internal memo from my father's company dated 3 months before his death. It detailed irregular transfers signed by Michael, supposedly with Dad's approval. But in the margin, my father had written one line in his own handwriting. "These aren't my instructions." I sat there for a long time, staring at that sentence. The proof was multiplying, and with it, so was the storm. A few nights later, as I was preparing dinner, headlights swept across my window. When I looked out, I saw Michael standing on the driveway. He didn't knock, just stood there, staring up at the house like a stranger looking at something he'd lost. After a minute, he turned and left. The next morning, I found a letter pushed under my door. No envelope, no greeting, just his handwriting. "You think you're helping Dad's memory, but you're only destroying our family. Stop before it's too late." I folded the paper carefully and placed it in the folder marked Evidence. Michael was unraveling. The control he once held so tightly was slipping through his fingers, and I could almost feel his desperation in the air. I didn't respond. Silence, I realized, was more powerful than any reply. Meanwhile, the lawyer confirmed what I already knew. The signature on the second will was indeed forged. "The pressure pattern is inconsistent," the analyst explained. "Your father's hand was steady, even near the end. This was done by someone else." The moment I heard those words, something inside me loosened. Months of grief and doubt began to fade, replaced by a quiet, burning strength. Still, the process wasn't without pain. The case became public within weeks. Reporters began sniffing around. Whispers spread among old family friends, and Michael's reputation began to fracture. He called one night. "Sarah, please," he said, voice trembling for the first time. "Let's just end this quietly." "There's no quiet way to end a lie, Michael," I said softly. "It echoes until someone tells the truth." He didn't speak after that. Just breathing, uneven, angry, defeated. Then the line went dead. Days turned into weeks. I spent that time organizing, building, healing. The fear that had once paralyzed me was gone, replaced by something steadier: purpose. I no longer flinched at the sound of his name. I no longer doubted what I had to do. One afternoon, I received a call from the board of my father's company. They wanted me present for an emergency meeting. When I walked into that room, Michael was already there. He looked smaller somehow, his sharp confidence replaced by the exhaustion of being exposed. The chairman spoke first. "Michael, the findings are clear. The revised documents are fraudulent. We've verified Mr. Evans's original directives. From this point forward, both Sarah and Michael will resume equal ownership as stated in the authentic will." Michael didn't argue. He didn't even look at me. His shoulders sagged as though the weight of his deceit had finally broken him. After the meeting, as everyone filed out, I stood by the window overlooking the city. He approached me quietly. "You got what you wanted," he said bitterly. I turned to him. "No, Michael. I didn't want this. I wanted my brother back." He laughed softly, a hollow, tired sound. "You'll never understand what it's like to live in someone's shadow." "Maybe not," I said. "But I do know this. Dad loved you. He just couldn't trust you, and now you've proven him right." He flinched, then walked away without another word. I watched him leave. his reflection fading in the glass until only the city lights remained. That night, I sat in the quiet of my father's study, surrounded by his books and the faint scent of cedar that still lingered on the shelves. I opened his old journal, the one he used to keep his thoughts in. On the last page, written in his familiar, steady handwriting, were the words, "The truth will always find its way home." I traced the letters with my fingertip, tears welling up in my eyes. Maybe, just maybe, it finally had, but I also knew this wasn't over yet. The world now knew what Michael had done, and that truth would follow him everywhere. Still, part of me couldn't help but feel a quiet sorrow. Justice often comes hand in hand with loss, and I had lost enough already. The unraveling wasn't just his, it was ours. The threads of our shared life, once so tightly woven, were now scattered across time, memory, and regret. And yet, in the stillness of that night, one thing was certain. I would carry my father's truth forward. Michael had chosen deceit, but I had chosen light. When the storm finally came, it did not begin with thunder. It began with whispers. Within days of the board's decision, word spread through the community like wildfire. People who had once praised Michael's ambition now questioned his character. Business partners withdrew quietly, investors hesitated, and the company's clean reputation began to crumble. The headlines were merciless. Evans' heir accused of forgery. Inheritance scandal rocks Evans' legacy. Every article carried our last name, our father's name, dragged through the mud. I should have felt vindicated, but all I felt was tired. Truth has a strange way of setting you free and breaking you at the same time. I kept my distance, refusing interviews and avoiding calls. The lawyer handled the press inquiries, and I stayed at the old house, trying to breathe in peace again. Yet even within those walls, the air felt heavy. I could feel my father's disappointment lingering, not at me, but at what his sons and daughters had become. One evening, rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder. I stood by the window, watching water streak down the glass like veins. It felt fitting. Everything was washing away. The lies, the masks, the illusion of control. That was when the knock came. I opened the door to find Michael standing there, soaked through, his eyes red, his face pale. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the rain roaring between us. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice was rough, almost unrecognizable. I stepped aside silently. He entered like a man returning to a battlefield he'd lost long ago. He looked around the living room, his eyes pausing on Dad's photograph above the fireplace. "I don't even recognize this place anymore," he said softly. "That's because you stopped looking at it," I replied. He nodded faintly. "You're right." We sat across from each other, the air thick with everything left unsaid. He rubbed his hands together, trying to steady himself. "It's all falling apart," he said finally. "The company, the deals, the press. I've lost everything." I folded my hands in my lap. "You didn't lose it, Michael. You gave it away the moment you chose lies over truth." His jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw something like shame flicker across his face. "Do you think I don't know that?" he said, voice rising. Every night I hear his voice in my head. Every time I close my eyes, I see him signing those papers, trusting me. "Then why did you do it?" I asked quietly. He looked up at me, eyes glistening. "Because I wanted to be him," he whispered. "I wanted to be respected, admired, remembered. But I was never enough. Not for him, not for anyone." I felt my throat tighten. Beneath all the lies and anger, there it was, the broken boy I once knew. "You were enough, Michael," I said softly. "He loved you. But you couldn't see it." He laughed bitterly. "Love doesn't pay debts, Sarah. You think you know everything, but you have no idea what I was dealing with. The loans, the pressure, the people waiting to see me fail. I thought if I could just fix everything first, I could make it right later." "But you never did," I said. He met my gaze, and for the first time, there was no defiance, only defeat. "No, I didn't." The thunder rolled outside, low and distant. The storm had finally arrived. He stood up, pacing near the window. "They're investigating me now," he said quietly. "The authorities. Fraud, forgery, misappropriation, the whole list. Mr. Graham said they might press charges." I stayed silent, feeling the weight of his words. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said, almost to himself. "I thought I could control it. But I can't. Control was never yours to begin with," I said. "You built everything on a lie. It was bound to collapse." He turned toward me suddenly, his voice breaking. "Then help me, Sarah, please. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding, that Dad wanted us both to have it, that he was confused at the end." I stood slowly. "I can't lie for you, Michael." "Not again." He stared at me, disbelief flashing across his face. "You'd let me go to prison?" I shook my head. "I'm not letting anything happen. You made those choices yourself." He stepped closer, eyes desperate. "You're my sister." "And he was my father," I said firmly. "And you betrayed him." The words struck like lightning, sharp, final, undeniable. Michael froze, his breath catching. Then slowly his shoulders dropped. "I guess I deserve that," he said. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he took a deep breath and said, "They'll take everything, you know. The money, the properties, the company, it'll all be gone." "Maybe that's the only way to start again," I said quietly. He looked at me for a long time, searching for something he could no longer find, then turned toward the door. Before leaving, he said, "I hope one day you forgive me." The door closed softly behind him. I stood there for a long time, listening to the rain pounding against the glass, the thunder echoing through the valley. My heart was heavy, but beneath the sorrow was something else. Peace. The storm had finally broken. The lies were gone, the truth had spoken, and there was no turning back. That night, I sat by the fire, watching the flames dance, and thought about my father's favorite saying, "Justice doesn't always come when you want it, but it comes when you're ready to face it." I realized I was ready now. Michael's empire had fallen apart, but mine was just beginning, not one built on inheritance or wealth, but on truth, resilience, and dignity. The storm had taken everything false with it, and what remained was real, and as I closed my eyes, I whispered into the quiet, "It's over, Dad. It's finally over." The days that followed felt like the slow exhale after years of holding my breath. The headlines faded. The calls stopped coming. Even the whispers around town began to soften, replaced by the gentle hum of ordinary life moving on. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel threatening. It felt healing. I spent most mornings in the garden, pruning roses my father had planted long before Michael and I ever understood what legacy meant. The earth was cool beneath my hands, rich and forgiving. There was something deeply human about working with soil, something that reminded me that new life always grows from what's been broken down. One afternoon, while trimming the edges of the flower bed, I found an old key half buried in the dirt. It was small, rusted, and familiar. I knew instantly where it belonged. Inside the house, in my father's study, there was a drawer in his old oak desk that had always been locked. Michael and I used to guess what was inside. Maybe a will, maybe letters from Mother, maybe nothing at all. My heart pounded as I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. Inside were only two things: a sealed envelope and a small, worn photograph. The photograph was of my father, Michael, and me, taken on the porch one summer afternoon. We were laughing, really laughing, the kind that comes from being completely safe with one another. I couldn't remember the last time I had seen us that happy. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. My father's handwriting flowed across, the page in his familiar, deliberate style. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you have found what I could not say out loud. I have always believed that truth, like love, must be tended to, even when it hurts. Michael and Sarah, You are both parts of me, the best and the worst. You will make mistakes, but I trust that you will find your way back to each other when the time comes. Remember, no inheritance can measure the worth of your soul. Tears blurred the ink. His words were both a wound and a balm. That night, I placed the letter on my bedside table and sat in the quiet glow of the lamp. The storm outside had long passed, but its echo still lived inside me, less violent now, more like the soft roll of distant thunder. A week later, the investigation concluded. Michael was charged but not imprisoned. His cooperation and full confession spared him the harshest punishment. He lost nearly everything: the business, the reputation, the comfort he had built on illusion. But he was free in the one way that finally mattered. He left town soon after. No grand goodbyes, no confrontation. Just a short note slipped under my door. "I'm leaving, Sarah. I don't know where yet, but I need to learn who I am without the shadow of what I've done. Thank you for standing up for him, and for me, even when I didn't deserve it. Michael." I read it twice, folded it neatly, and placed it beside Father's letter. Two men I had loved, both trying to make peace in their own ways. And somehow I understood. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about forgetting. It's about refusing to carry the weight any longer. Months passed. The estate was settled, the old house restored to a quiet rhythm. Sometimes the loneliness felt heavy, but it was a peaceful kind of solitude, the kind that lets you listen to your own heart again. One early morning, as I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, I saw a delivery van pull up. The driver handed me a plain brown package, no return address. Inside was a small wooden carving of a tree, rough, imperfect, but made with care. Beneath it, a note in Michael's handwriting. "For the garden you keep growing." I smiled. It was enough. The years of bitterness, anger, and betrayal had cost us more than money could ever repay. But here, in this quiet moment, I felt something close to peace. My father's voice seemed to linger in the wind. "Truth will set you free, Sarah." And it had. That night, I walked out into the garden again. The air was cool, the roses heavy with dew. I knelt beside the newest blooms, the ones I'd planted after the storm, and whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. Life had not turned out the way I imagined, but maybe it had unfolded exactly as it needed to. The house was no longer haunted by secrets, the silence no longer sharp with guilt. I had learned that strength isn't always loud. It's the quiet resolve to keep living, keep growing, even after everything has fallen apart. As the moon rose, high over the garden, I picked up my father's letter once more, tracing the ink with my fingertips. I finally understood the truth he had known all along, that love, when it is honest, can survive even the deepest betrayal. And maybe, just maybe, someday, Michael and I would find our way back to that porch in the photograph. Not as enemies, not as strangers, but as the brother and sister our father had always hoped we would be. Until then, I would keep tending the roses. Because some things, like truth, like love, deserve to be cared for, no matter how long it takes for them to bloom again. If this story touched your heart, take a quiet moment to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us, what would forgiveness look like for you after such a betrayal? And if you believe that truth always finds its way home, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories continue to bloom. Time has a strange way of softening the edges of pain. Months turned into a year, and a year into 2. Seasons came and went, each leaving behind traces of who I used to be and who I had become. The house no longer felt like a museum of loss. It breathed again. I filled the empty rooms with laughter from friends, music on Sunday mornings, and the comforting smell of cinnamon and coffee. There were days when I still thought of Michael. Sometimes it was a memory. His teenage grin, the way he used to race me to the end of the driveway, or the evenings we sat under the porch light, daring each other to tell the truth about everything and anything. Other times, it was a quiet ache. The kind that reminded me that forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It simply gives you the freedom to move beyond it. One winter evening, as I decorated the Christmas tree, a small card arrived in the mail. It was postmarked from a seaside town I'd never heard of. Inside was a photo of a small workshop by the harbor. On the back, written in Michael's handwriting, were just 5 words. Still learning. Still your brother. I sat down on the couch, tears rising faster than I expected. For so long, I had carried both anger and sorrow like twin burdens. Now, for the first time, they felt lighter, like they were finally dissolving into something gentler. I placed the photo beside Father's letter on the mantel. The two of them, my father's faith and my brother's redemption, stood together, quietly reminding me that love was never truly gone. It only changed form. Life became steady again. I reopened my small design business, something I had set aside during the chaos. Creating beauty from broken things felt symbolic, almost sacred. I used reclaimed wood, old glass, pieces of forgotten homes. Every piece told a story of transformation, of something once ruined, made new again. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at a community event about resilience and family. I hesitated at first. What could I possibly say that wouldn't reopen old wounds? But then I remembered my father's words. Truth must be tended to, even when it hurts. So I went. Standing before that small audience, I told my story, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I spoke about betrayal, loss, and the long road toward forgiveness. About how sometimes justice looks like exposure, and sometimes it looks like grace. When I finished, there was silence. Then a woman in the front row, gray hair, kind eyes, stood up and said softly, "You didn't lose, dear. You just refused to hate." Her words stayed with me. That night, I walked through the garden again. The roses were dormant, their stems bare against the frost, but I didn't see them as dead. I saw them as waiting, resting before blooming again. It struck me that my story was like that too. The pain had been real, the betrayal deep, but beneath it all, something beautiful had been quietly growing. The strength to stand alone, and the courage to forgive. Months later, I received another letter. This one was longer. Michael wrote about the small life he was building, how he was volunteering with a local youth group, helping kids who'd grown up in broken homes. He said he finally understood what Father had tried to teach us. "I used to think power was about control," he wrote. "Now I know it's about honesty. You showed me that." At the end of the letter, he added, "If you ever want to visit, the door is open." I smiled through my tears. Maybe one day I would, but for now, I was content with the distance, the kind of distance that no longer hurt, but healed. Spring came again. The garden bloomed brighter than ever. The tree Michael had carved for me sat at the center, its wooden branches catching the morning light. Around it, the roses swayed gently, their petals soft as breath. As I watched them, I thought about everything we had lost and everything we had found. Truth had torn us apart, but truth had also set us free, and maybe that was the point. Not every story ends with reunion or forgiveness that can be spoken out loud. Sometimes the quiet acceptance of what is, and the courage to keep loving anyway, is enough. I looked toward the sky, where the evening sun painted the world in gold. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had learned to live honestly, even with the scars. The garden rustled softly in the wind. Somewhere far away, I hoped my brother could feel it too, the peace that comes after the storm, the forgiveness that needs no words. And as the day faded into dusk, I whispered into the stillness, "Thank you, Dad. We're finally okay." The wind answered with the gentle flutter of leaves, like a promise that love, once planted, never truly dies. If Sarah's story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever found peace and truth even when it hurt? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe that love and honesty can rebuild even the most broken bonds, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this continue to reach those who need them most.